the beginning of the storm. I never imagined that my life would change so drastically because of one stolen moment in a garage. If someone had told me years ago that I'd find myself in a war between love, loyalty, and betrayal within my own family, I would have laughed. I loved my wife deeply, and for most of our relationship, I believed that love would be enough to protect us from anything. What I didn't realize was that sometimes the greatest threat comes not from strangers, but from those who are supposed to be closest to us. When I met Jenna, I fell in love with her effortlessly. She wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. She had this quiet intensity about her, a unique, almost ethereal beauty that didn't fit conventional molds. Her jet black hair framed her face in a way that made her look both fierce and vulnerable at the same time. She carried herself like someone who didn't need the world's approval, but secretly feared it anyway. I loved that duality, but from the very beginning, there was a shadow that hovered just behind her smile. Her sister, Mary. Mary was everything society loves to praise. She had been a successful model, the kind whose face you'd see on the front of glossy magazines in airports. Tall, blonde, conventionally stunning, she was the golden child of the family. While Jenna had chosen an academic path, Mary basked in the spotlight. Their parents adored her, or more accurately, adored the image she presented to the world. It wasn't just admiration, it was worship. I remember the first time Jenna mentioned her. We were still new in our relationship, lost in that intoxicating phase where every word felt important. She had laughed lightly and said, "Wait until you meet my sister. Everyone loves her." I thought she was being modest. She wasn't. When the day came for me to meet Jenna's family, I understood the complicated weight she carried. Mary swept into the room like she owned it. She greeted me with a practiced smile, the kind models perfect in front of mirrors, and within seconds, she had everyone's attention. Jenna stiffened slightly beside me, pretending not to care, but I noticed. Over the next several weeks, Jenna would ask me, at random moments, often late at night when the world was quiet, whether I thought Mary was prettier than her. I would always take her hands and tell her the truth. To me, Jenna was incomparable. She was beauty in its rawest, most unfiltered form. Mary was like a photograph in a magazine, flawless but distant. Jenna was real. But reassurance didn't erase years of conditioning. Mary had always been the golden child, and Jenna had always been the other one. Jenna told me stories about their teenage years, how Mary would flirt with every boy Jenna liked, how she seemed to turn every spotlight toward herself without even trying. And worse, how their parents would encourage it, laughing off Jenna's pain as childish jealousy. It was no wonder she carried insecurities like invisible scars. As time passed, I learned that Mary's flirtations weren't confined to Jenna's past. She had a strange way of inserting herself into every corner of our relationship. Every time we visited Jenna's family, Mary would find some excuse to be close to me. A hand on my arm a little too long, a comment about my physique, subtle innuendos disguised as jokes. Everyone in the room would feel it, including Jenna, who would withdraw into herself for days after. I used to tell myself Mary was just insecure, that her behavior was a pathetic attempt to hold on to her fading spotlight. But as the years rolled on, it became clear. It wasn't insecurity. It was cruelty wrapped in charm. For 6 long years, this pattern repeated. A family gathering, inappropriate comments, tension, arguments afterward, me trying to hold Jenna as she cried. I hated it, but I also never imagined she would cross a line she couldn't step back from. I was wrong. The night of Jenna's mother's birthday was supposed to be uneventful, just another family event. I had grown accustomed to bracing myself emotionally whenever we visited. I never let myself be alone with Mary, at least not intentionally. But that night, she called me over to the garage, asking me to help carry some supplies. It seemed harmless. The moment the door closed behind us, everything changed. The garage was dimly lit, the faint yellow bulb above flickering in uneven intervals, making the shadows stretch and dance along the walls. I remember the faint smell of engine oil and fresh paint. Mary's father had recently renovated the place to store extra furniture for the birthday party. It was quiet, almost too quiet, compared to the noise of laughter and music coming from the house. "Could you grab that box for me?" Mary's voice was smooth, almost sweet, like honey hiding a thorn. She pointed toward a large plastic container in the corner. I nodded and stepped forward, crouching to get a better grip. That's when I felt it. A hand on my shoulder, light but deliberate. I straightened immediately. Mary? She stood close, too close. The faint perfume she always wore, expensive, floral, intoxicating, filled the air between us. Her eyes held mine with a kind of intent I'd felt before, but had always brushed off as meaningless flirting. But this time, something was different. You've gotten stronger, she whispered with a laugh that didn't sound innocent at all. I stepped back, but she followed, placing her hand flat on my chest. You know, you've always been the one I should have ended up with, she said, as if stating a fact, not a confession. My pulse spiked. For years I'd endured her comments, the inappropriate jokes, the lingering touches. But this was crossing a line that couldn't be blurred or excused. Mary, I said sharply, pushing her hand away, enough. But she didn't stop. She leaned in, closing the distance, her breath warm against my neck. Don't act like you don't feel it too, she whispered. You've looked at me. I've seen it. Everyone has. Even Jenna knows she's always lived in my shadow. Something inside me snapped at those words. That's disgusting, I hissed. Jenna is my wife. You're her sister. What the hell is wrong with you? But instead of shame, I saw amusement flicker across her face. A dark, twisted amusement. And then, without warning, she grabbed my collar and kissed me. It wasn't a soft, fleeting mistake. It was forceful. A deliberate, calculated move meant to leave a mark, not on my lips, but on the entire foundation of my marriage. I shoved her off immediately, stumbling back into a stack of boxes. What the hell are you doing? I shouted. She laughed, like it was a game to her. Relax, she said, brushing her hair back. It's not like I'm going to tell anyone. And then, with that same cold smile, she added, but maybe I will. Depends on how nice you are to me. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just flirting anymore. It was a trap. I stormed out of the garage, shoving the door open so hard it slammed against the wall. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking. I didn't stop until I was outside, away from the smell of oil and her poisonous perfume. Jenna was on the patio, laughing with a few cousins, but when she saw my face, her smile faded instantly. What happened? She asked, coming closer. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her everything right there in front of everyone. But then I froze. Not because I doubted what I wanted to say, but because of the way Mary emerged from the garage a moment later, calm, composed, pretending nothing had happened. She locked eyes with me for a split second, and in that look, I saw it clearly. She was daring me to say something, because she knew, or at least believed, that no one would believe me over her. I didn't sleep that night. I barely even blinked. I replayed the moment over and over again, the way she had cornered me, the way she had kissed me, the way she had laughed, and worst of all, the way she held all the power in that moment. Mary was a master manipulator. She always had been. She had spent her entire life convincing everyone she was untouchable, the perfect daughter, the glamorous sister, the adored golden child. And now she had decided to turn that image into a weapon. The next morning, I told Jenna everything. She stared at me for a long time, completely silent, her eyes wide but unreadable. Then she whispered, "She kissed you?" As if she couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. "Yes," I said firmly. "She cornered me in the garage. I pushed her away immediately. I swear to you, Jenna, I did not do anything. But she's not going to stop here." Jenna shook her head slowly. No, she wouldn't do that." "She did," I said. Tears welled in her eyes, not out of anger at me, but out of something far more painful, the shattering of denial. For years, she'd tried to convince herself that Mary's behavior was just teasing, nothing dangerous. She'd been told her whole life to stop being too sensitive. And now she was realizing what I had already known. Her sister was capable of anything. "I need you to believe me," I said, my voice breaking slightly, despite my best efforts to stay composed. She took a step toward me, resting her hand against my chest, not to comfort me, but to steady herself. "I do," she whispered. I can't believe she would actually do it." But deep down, I knew she could believe it. She had always known what Mary was capable of. She had just spent years pretending otherwise. And Mary? She acted the next day as if nothing had happened. She smiled. She hugged Jenna. She even came up to me and said, "Good morning," with the same sickly sweet tone she always used. If someone had walked in at that moment, They would have thought she was the perfect sister-in-law. But beneath that flawless exterior was a woman who had just declared war. And whether I liked it or not, I was now at the center of it.